The moment I opened my eyes in that hospital room and saw my wife crying beside my bed, I thought I was the luckiest man alive. I had survived. The 18-wheeler that had crossed into my lane on Route 47 had crushed the driver's side of my car like it was made of paper, and somehow, against every odd, I was still breathing. Vanessa held my hand and told me she had been so scared, that she could not imagine life without me, that she had prayed every single night for 3 weeks while I was in a coma. My brother David stood behind her, his eyes red, his voice breaking when he said he thought he had lost me. I believed every tear. I believed every word. I did not know then that while I was fighting for my life in that hospital bed, they had been planning what to do with my money after I was gone. I did not know that the accident that almost killed me was not an accident at all. My name is Michael Brennan. I am 42 years old, and I built my life from nothing. My father died when I was 17, leaving behind a mountain of debt and a mother who worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. I started working construction the summer after high school while taking night classes to earn my business degree. By the time I was 30, I had started my own commercial construction company. By 35, Brennan Construction was one of the largest contractors in the state of Ohio. I employed over 200 people. I had contracts worth tens of millions of dollars. I had earned every penny through sweat, sacrifice, and an absolute refusal to fail. I met Vanessa at a charity gala when I was 34. She was working as an event coordinator, beautiful in a way that made it hard to think clearly. She had dark hair that fell past her shoulders and green eyes that seemed to look right through you. She laughed at my jokes even when they were not funny. She asked questions about my work that seemed genuinely curious rather than politely obligatory. When I asked for her phone number, she wrote it on my palm with a pen she pulled from her clutch, and she told me not to wash my hands until I had saved it in my phone. Our courtship was fast. Vanessa seemed to understand me in a way no one else ever had. She knew when I needed space to work and when I needed someone to pull me away from the office. She was supportive of my ambitions, but not intimidated by them. She had her own career, her own interests, her own life. She was not looking for someone to complete her, she said. She was looking for a partner. We were married 11 months after we met. My mother, Eleanor, cried at the wedding and told me she had never seen me so happy. My brother David was my best man. He gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry and raised their glasses to the future we were all certain would be bright. I loved Vanessa more than I had ever loved anyone. I trusted her completely. That trust would nearly cost me my life. David and I had always been close, or so I believed. He was 3 years younger than me, and I had spent my childhood protecting him from the bullies who sensed his weakness. David was not built like me. He was thinner, softer, more interested in books than in the physical labor that dominated our blue-collar neighborhood. I defended him because that was what older brothers did. I gave him money when he was struggling. I hired him at my company when no one else would take a chance on him. I believed that our bond was unbreakable because I had never given him any reason to break it. What I did not see, what I refused to see, was the resentment that had been building inside David for decades. I was the successful one, the one who had made something of himself, the one our mother bragged about to her friends. David worked in the accounting department at my company, a job I had created specifically for him. And every day he sat in an office that my success had built. Every paycheck came from my efforts. Every achievement of mine reminded him of his own failures. I thought I was helping him. I did not realize I was humiliating him. The accident happened on a Thursday evening in October. I had been driving home from a job site about an hour north of Columbus. The sun was setting, and I remember thinking how beautiful the autumn leaves looked against the orange sky. I never saw the truck coming. The next thing I remember is the sound of metal screaming and the world turning upside down. Then darkness. I was in a coma for 23 days. The doctors told my family that they were not sure I would wake up, and if I did, there was a significant chance of brain damage. My skull had been fractured. My left leg was broken in 4 places. 3 ribs had punctured my lung. The surgeon who put me back together later told me that he had seen soldiers survive less damage. I should not have lived, but I did. When I finally opened my eyes, Vanessa was there. David was there. My mother was there, looking older than I had ever seen her, as if my accident had aged her 10 years in 3 weeks. They told me what had happened, how the truck driver had lost control, how emergency responders had needed over an hour to cut me from the wreckage. The truck driver had died on impact. There would be no one to blame, no lawsuit to file, no explanation beyond tragic accident. I accepted this story because I had no reason to question it. My focus was on recovery. The doctor said I would need months of physical therapy to walk normally again. My company had been running on autopilot during my coma, managed by my senior staff, with oversight from David, who had stepped up in ways I had never expected. I was proud of him. I told him so. He hugged me and said he was just glad I was alive. The first hint that something was wrong came 3 weeks after I regained consciousness. I was still in the hospital, working through exercises with a physical therapist, when I overheard a conversation that was not meant for my ears. My room had a shared bathroom, connected to an adjacent patient room. The walls were thin, and sound carried in ways the hospital designers had not anticipated. I was resting after a particularly grueling therapy session when I heard Vanessa's voice through the wall. She must have stepped into the bathroom to take a phone call, not realizing how clearly I could hear her. She was talking to David. I only caught fragments of the conversation. Something about paperwork that needed to be filed. Something about a timeline that had been disrupted. And then words that made my blood freeze in my veins. She said, and I will never forget this, that they needed to be patient now because the plan had failed and they had to wait for another opportunity. The plan had failed. I lay in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what I had just heard. There had to be an innocent explanation. Vanessa and David were probably discussing business matters, something related to the company during my absence. The plan that had failed was probably a contract bid or a construction timeline. My mind created rational explanations because the alternative was too horrifying to contemplate. But I could not shake the chill that had settled into my bones. I said nothing about what I had overheard. Instead, I watched. I paid attention to details I had previously ignored. The way Vanessa and David exchanged glances when they thought I was not looking. The way conversations stopped abruptly when I entered a room. The way my brother's concern for my health seemed slightly performative, like an actor who had not quite mastered his lines. I told myself I was being paranoid. The accident had traumatized me. The medications were affecting my thinking. My wife loved me. My brother loved me. The suspicions creeping through my mind were symptoms of trauma, nothing more. Then I found the recording. It was 6 weeks after I had woken from the coma. I had finally been discharged from the hospital and was recovering at home, still using a wheelchair most of the time, but regaining strength daily. Vanessa was at work, or so she had told me. I had been looking for a charger for my tablet and had gone into her home office to check her desk drawers. In the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of old magazines, I found a digital voice recorder. It was a small device, easily overlooked, the kind that could record for hours on a single charge. I had no idea why my wife would have such a thing. Vanessa was not a journalist or a student. There was no professional reason for her to own a voice recorder. I pressed play. The recording was dated 3 days before my accident. The voices on it belonged to Vanessa and David, and what they were discussing destroyed every illusion I had ever held about my life. They were talking about money. My money. The life insurance policy I had taken out 5 years earlier, worth $3 million, with Vanessa as the sole beneficiary. They were talking about the company, which I had structured to transfer to David in the event of my death, a provision I had insisted on because I wanted to keep the business in the family. They were talking about how much simpler everything would be if I were gone. And then David said something that made me stop breathing. He said that the truck driver had been expensive but reliable, and that it was a shame the job had not been finished properly. He said they might need to find another solution if I recovered fully, because the window for making it look like an accident was closing. They had paid someone to kill me. The truck that had crossed into my lane was not an accident. The driver who had died on impact had been hired by my wife and my brother to murder me for my money. The only reason I was alive was that their assassin had failed. I sat in Vanessa's office, holding that recorder, and the world I had known collapsed around me. Everything I believed about my marriage, about my family, about the people I trusted most, was a lie. The woman who held my hand in the hospital, who cried over my bedside, who told me she could not imagine life without me, had paid someone to take that life. The brother I had protected, supported, and loved had conspired to have me killed so he could take everything I had built. The grief was overwhelming. But beneath the grief, something else was growing. Something cold and hard and patient. They had tried to kill me. They had failed. And now they believed they had gotten away with it. They had no idea that I knew the truth, that ignorance was going to be their undoing. I made a decision in that moment that would define the next several months of my life. I was not going to confront them. I was not going to go to the police. Not yet. I was going to gather evidence. I was going to document everything. I was going to build a case so airtight that there would be no possibility of escape. And then I was going to destroy them both. I put the recorder back exactly where I had found it. I returned to the living room and resumed my recovery exercises as if nothing had happened. When Vanessa came home that evening, I kissed her and told her I had missed her. When David stopped by to check on me, I thanked him for taking care of the company. I played the role of the grateful survivor, the loving husband, the devoted brother. It was the performance of my life, and I executed it flawlessly. The next morning, I called a private investigator named Frank Morrison. I had used Frank years earlier for a background check on a potential business partner, and I knew he was discreet, thorough, and completely trustworthy. I asked him to meet me at a coffee shop across town, a location neither Vanessa nor David would think to look for me. I brought the recorder with me. Frank listened to the recording without visible emotion. When it was finished, he looked at me with an expression I could not quite read. He asked if I wanted to go to the police. I said no, not yet. I needed more than a recording. I needed bank records, communication logs, evidence of the payment to the truck driver. I needed enough proof to guarantee conviction. Frank nodded slowly. He said it would take time and money. I told him that I had plenty of both, and that time was the one thing I was willing to spend. He told me he would start immediately. Over the following weeks, I continued my recovery, while Frank worked in the shadows. My physical therapy progressed well. I graduated from wheelchair to crutches to a cane. I returned to work part-time, easing back into the business that had consumed most of my adult life. Everyone around me believed I was a man grateful to be alive, focused on healing, unaware of any threats. The truth was that every interaction, every conversation, every moment with Vanessa and David was a calculated performance, designed to keep them comfortable and unsuspecting. Frank's first significant finding came about a month into his investigation. He had traced a series of cash withdrawals from an account Vanessa had opened without my knowledge. The withdrawals totaled $50,000 over a period of 3 months leading up to my accident. The account had been funded by transfers from our joint savings, amounts small enough that I had never noticed. Frank had also discovered that Vanessa had been in contact with a man named Jerome Wilson, a convicted felon with a history of violent crimes who had been released from prison 8 months before my accident. Jerome Wilson was the connection to the truck driver. Frank obtained phone records showing calls between Jerome and the man who had driven that 18-wheeler into my lane. The driver, a man named Carl Hendricks, had been in debt to several dangerous people. He had been paid to stage an accident and had been promised that he would survive the crash. The promise had been a lie. Carl's death had been part of the plan all along, eliminating a witness who could have talked. The depth of their planning was staggering. They had not simply decided to kill me one day. They had researched methods, identified vulnerabilities, recruited accomplices, and executed a plan that should have been untraceable. If Carl had survived, he would have been the only link back to them. With him dead, there was no one to question, no one to investigate, no loose ends. Except they had made one mistake. They had trusted each other enough to speak openly about their conspiracy, and that conversation had been recorded. I asked Frank how he thought they had come to trust each other so completely. He looked at me with something like pity in his eyes, and told me that there was something else I needed to know. Something worse than the murder plot. He said that Vanessa and David had been having an affair for over 2 years. The affair had started long before I was injured, long before the plan to kill me was conceived. David had been visiting our home while I was at work, sleeping with my wife in our bed, laughing at my ignorance while sharing my life with the woman I loved. The murder plot had not been born from sudden greed. It had grown from a relationship built on deception. 2 people who had found in each other the perfect partner for betrayal. I received this news with a strange calm that surprised even me. Perhaps I had already suspected. Perhaps some part of me had known that the conspiracy required a level of intimacy that could only come from complete trust. Or perhaps I was simply past the point where additional pain could register. They had tried to kill me. Learning that they had also been sleeping together seemed almost trivial by comparison. Frank continued his investigation while I continued my performance. I smiled at Vanessa across the dinner table. I joked with David about when I would be ready to return to work full-time. I attended family gatherings and let my mother fuss over my recovery. No one suspected anything because I gave them nothing to suspect. The breakthrough came 3 months after I had found the recorder. Frank had finally obtained bank records that showed a transfer of $40,000 from Jerome Wilson to Carl Hendricks 2 weeks before my accident. He had testimony from a former cellmate of Jerome's who had heard him bragging about a job he had arranged for a rich man's wife. And he had discovered something that turned the investigation in an unexpected direction. The original voice recorder I had found was not the only recording. Vanessa, it turned out, had a habit of recording conversations. Perhaps she was paranoid about being double-crossed. Perhaps she wanted leverage in case things went wrong. Whatever the reason, Frank found multiple recordings hidden in various locations throughout our home. Recordings of conversations with David planning the timeline of my murder. Recordings of calls with Jerome Wilson negotiating payment. Recordings that documented, in Vanessa's own words and her own voice, every step of the conspiracy. I listened to those recordings late at night, alone in my home office, while Vanessa slept upstairs in our bed. I heard my wife and my brother discuss the best way to make my death look accidental. I heard them calculate how long they would need to wait after my death before they could be together publicly without raising suspicion. I heard Vanessa laugh, actually laugh, about how easy I had been to deceive, how I had never questioned anything. how trusting I was. The recordings confirmed what I already knew, but they also revealed something I had not expected. The plan to kill me had not originated with Vanessa. It had been David's idea from the beginning. David, who had spent his entire life in my shadow. David, who had watched me succeed while he struggled. David, who had decided that if he could not have what I had earned, he would simply take it from me by any means necessary. Vanessa had been receptive to the idea because she had married me for my money and had grown tired of waiting for the natural course of events. She wanted the life insurance payout. She wanted the freedom to be with David openly. She wanted to be a wealthy widow rather than a wealthy wife. Together, they had constructed a plan that should have worked perfectly. But I was still alive. And now I held all the evidence I needed. I met with an attorney named Grace Holloway, a former prosecutor who now worked in private practice. She specialized in complex criminal cases, and her reputation for ruthlessness was well known throughout the legal community. I played her the recordings. I showed her Frank's documentation. I laid out the entire conspiracy in a presentation that took over 3 hours to complete. Grace sat in silence for a long time after I finished. Then she looked at me and asked what I wanted. She said the evidence was more than sufficient for criminal prosecution. She said that what I had could send both of them to prison for attempted murder, conspiracy, and a host of related charges. She asked if I wanted her to coordinate with the district attorney's office. I said yes, but not yet. First, I wanted to take care of some other matters. I wanted to protect my assets. I wanted to revoke every legal document that gave Vanessa or David any claim to my estate. I wanted to remove David from any position of power within my company. I wanted to make sure that when the hammer fell, they would have nothing left. Grace advised me that what I was proposing could be seen as retaliatory and might complicate the criminal case. I told her I did not care. They had tried to take everything from me, including my life. I was going to take everything from them first. The next 2 months were a flurry of legal activity, conducted entirely in secret. I had new wills and estate documents drawn up that left everything to my mother and to a charitable foundation I established in my father's name. I restructured the ownership of my company, removing David from any succession plan and installing a trusted employee named Lucas Webb as my backup designate. I quietly transferred significant assets into trusts that were shielded from any claims Vanessa might try to make. I also started documenting David's incompetence at the company. While I had been recovering, David had made several questionable decisions that had cost us money and clients. I had initially overlooked these mistakes, attributing them to inexperience and the stress of managing the company during my absence. Now I saw them for what they were. David had never cared about the company. He had only cared about what he could take from it. I built a paper trail that would justify his termination for cause. Every missed deadline, every lost client, every financial discrepancy was documented and filed. When the time came to fire him, there would be no grounds for wrongful termination claims. He would leave with nothing, because he deserved nothing. The confrontation happened on a Saturday evening in March, almost exactly 6 months after I had found the first recording. I had invited Vanessa and David to dinner at our home, telling them I wanted to celebrate my full recovery. I had been walking without a cane for 3 weeks. The doctors had cleared me to return to all normal activities. To everyone around me, I was a man who had been given a second chance at life and was eager to embrace it. Vanessa prepared an elaborate meal. David brought an expensive bottle of wine. My mother joined us, happy to see her sons together, grateful that I had survived to share another family dinner. The evening was pleasant, filled with laughter and stories and the kind of warmth that families are supposed to share. I played my part perfectly, giving no indication of what was about to happen. After dinner, I asked David to join me in my study. I said I wanted to discuss his future at the company, that I was thinking about expanding his role now that I was back at full strength. He followed me eagerly, probably believing that his patience was finally about to be rewarded. Vanessa stayed in the dining room with my mother, clearing dishes and making small talk. In my study, I closed the door and gestured for David to sit. He looked relaxed, confident, completely unaware. I took my time settling into my chair, pouring myself a drink, allowing the silence to stretch. Then I placed a small digital voice recorder on the desk between us and pressed play. David's face transformed as he heard his own voice discussing my murder. The color drained from his cheeks. His eyes widened with a terror that he could not hide. He tried to speak, tried to explain, tried to claim that the recording was fake, that someone was framing him, that I could not possibly believe what I was hearing. I let him ramble. I let him dig himself deeper. And then I told him to shut up. I told him I knew everything. The affair, the planning, the payment to Jerome Wilson, the hired truck driver, the $50,000 skimmed from my savings, the years of resentment that had curdled into something murderous. I told him I had documentation that would send him to prison for the rest of his life. And I told him that his association with my family was over. David broke down in a way I had never seen before. He sobbed and begged and pleaded. He said he had never meant for it to go so far, that Vanessa had pushed him into it, that he had been weak and stupid and had made a terrible mistake. He asked for forgiveness. He asked for mercy. He asked me to remember that we were brothers, that blood was supposed to mean something. I looked at the man I had protected since childhood, the man I had supported and employed and loved despite every disappointment, and I felt nothing. No anger, no grief, just a cold emptiness where fraternal affection used to be. I told David that he had made his choice, and now he would face the consequences. I told him the police would be informed in the morning, and I told him to leave my house and never contact me or my mother again. David left without another word. I watched him walk to his car, watched him drive away, watched the taillights disappear into the night. Then I went to the dining room to confront my wife. Vanessa knew something was wrong the moment she saw my face. She started to speak, to ask what had happened with David, but I cut her off. I placed the recorder on the table and pressed play. My mother sat frozen in her chair, unable to comprehend what she was hearing. Vanessa's face became a mask, all emotion draining away as she realized that her carefully constructed world was collapsing. When the recording finished, my mother was crying. Vanessa was silent. I told Vanessa that our marriage was over, that I would be filing for divorce in the morning, and that she would receive nothing. No alimony, no settlement, no share of any assets. I told her about the recordings, the bank records, the testimony Frank had gathered. I told her that she could cooperate with the divorce, or she could fight it. But either way, she was going to prison. Vanessa tried one last manipulation. She reached for my hand and told me she loved me, that David had corrupted her, that she had never wanted any of this. She was convincing. Even knowing everything I knew, some part of me wanted to believe her. But I had listened to those recordings. I had heard her laugh about my gullibility. I had heard her count my money as if it were already hers. Whatever she had once felt for me, if she had ever felt anything real, was long gone. All that remained was greed and deception. I pulled my hand away and told her she had until morning to pack a bag and leave. She could stay at a hotel, or stay with David, or stay on the street for all I cared. But she would not spend another night under my roof. She looked at me with hatred then, all pretense of love abandoned. She called me names I will not repeat. She threatened me with claims of abuse, of manipulation, of lies that would destroy my reputation. I told her to go ahead and try. I told her that her recordings had documented everything, including her own confessions. I told her that the only reputation that would be destroyed was her own. Vanessa left that night. My mother stayed with me, too shocked to drive home, too devastated to be alone. I held her while she cried, while she asked how her sons could have come to this, while she tried to understand how the family she had raised had been hiding such darkness. I did not have answers. I only had the truth. The police arrested Vanessa and David the following week. The district attorney, presented with Frank's evidence and Grace's documentation, pursued charges of attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and a host of financial crimes. Jerome Wilson was arrested in Florida and agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. The case against my wife and brother was overwhelming. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified for 2 days, describing the recordings, the discovery, the investigation. I looked at Vanessa and David sitting at the defense table and felt nothing but the cold satisfaction of justice being served. Their attorneys tried to discredit the recordings, to argue entrapment, to suggest that I had fabricated evidence. None of it worked. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Vanessa was sentenced to 25 years in state prison. David received 20 years. Jerome Wilson got 15 years, despite his cooperation. The judge, in her sentencing remarks, called it one of the most cold-blooded conspiracies she had ever seen. She expressed particular disgust that a man's own wife and brother had conspired to end his life for financial gain. She told them they would have decades to contemplate the choices that had led them to her courtroom. The divorce was finalized while Vanessa was awaiting trial. She contested nothing because she had no leverage to contest with. I kept the house, the company, every asset I had earned. She left the marriage with nothing but criminal charges and public disgrace. The aftermath was painful in ways I had not anticipated. My mother struggled to accept what David had done. She aged rapidly in the months following his arrest, the stress and grief taking a visible toll on her health. Our relationship grew closer as we became each other's only remaining family, but the shadow of David's betrayal hung over every interaction. She visited him in prison once, hoping for some explanation, some acknowledgement of wrongdoing. He blamed me for everything. He said I had always overshadowed him, always made him feel small, always taken everything for myself. My mother never visited him again. The company survived. Lucas Webb proved to be a capable partner, and together we navigated the publicity surrounding my attempted murder. Some clients were uncomfortable doing business with a man whose family drama had made the news. Others were drawn by the story, curious to meet someone who had survived such a dramatic betrayal. On balance, the attention probably helped more than it hurt. I sold the house where Vanessa and I had lived. I could not sleep there anymore, could not walk through rooms that held memories I no longer wanted. I bought a condominium in a new neighborhood and started fresh. The furniture was different. The artwork was different. Everything was designed to feel like a new beginning rather than a continuation of a tainted past. The question people ask most often is whether I regret any of it. Whether I wish I had done something differently. Whether I would have been happier not knowing the truth. The answer is no. The truth was the only thing that saved me. If I had not found that recorder, if I had not learned what they were planning, they would have tried again. Another accident, another illness, another opportunity to finish what they had started. My survival depended on knowing what I was facing. I regret trusting the wrong people. I regret believing that love and blood could protect me from those who wanted what I had. I regret the years I spent blind to Vanessa's true nature. The years I spent supporting a brother who secretly hated me. But I do not regret uncovering the truth. I do not regret fighting back. I do not regret making them face the consequences of their choices. Vanessa writes to me from prison sometimes. Letters that alternate between apology, and accusation, between claims of reformed character and threats of what she will do when she is released. I do not read them. I do not respond. She is a chapter of my life that is closed, and I have no interest in revisiting it. David has never written. I do not know if he has truly accepted what he did, or if he still believes himself the victim of my success. I do not care. He is serving his sentence. He will be in his late 50s when he is released, assuming good behavior. By then, I will be an old man, and whatever he wants from life will be his to pursue. But he will pursue it without me. He is no longer my brother. He is just a man who tried to kill me and failed. My mother passed away last year, peacefully in her sleep, still carrying the grief of what her younger son had become. I was with her at the end, holding her hand the way she had held mine when I was a child. She told me she was proud of me. She told me she was sorry for everything David had done. She told me to find happiness and not let the past define my future. I promised her I would try. I am trying. Every day I am trying. I have built a new life, a smaller life, one with fewer people but more genuine connections. I have learned to trust again, slowly and carefully, with people who have earned that trust through actions rather than words. I have learned that survival is not just about staying alive. It is about refusing to let those who hurt you determine who you become. The accident that should have killed me became the beginning of a different story. Not the story my wife and brother intended, where they inherited my wealth and lived happily on the foundation of my grave. But a story of discovery, of justice, of a man who refused to be a victim. They planned my funeral while I was alive. Instead, I survived to bury our relationships, our pretenses, and every lie they had ever told. I am Michael Brennan. I am 42 years old. I survived an attempt on my life by the two people I trusted most in this world. And I am still standing. Some nights, I still dream about the accident. The screech of metal, the world spinning, the darkness closing in. I wake up in a sweat, heart racing, convinced for a moment that I am back in that car waiting to die. But then, I open my eyes and see my new apartment, my new life. The morning light coming through windows that belong only to me. I survived. They did not destroy me, and that is the only revenge that truly matters.